Hi, it's Christina with the Sisyphean Journal, and today we're looking at a case from 1954 in Texas. Dr. Sylvia Redman was a 57-year-old woman who had a license to practice naturopathy in Texas. On October 20th of 1954, she signed a confession regarding the death of 27-year-old homemaker Betty Ledel the previous day. Redman said that Betty had come to her Fort Worth practice, Nature Foods and Clinic, saying she thought she was pregnant. She said that Betty asked her if I could help get rid of the baby. I told her the danger of everything, and she said she was not afraid. I told her I would rather her to go somewhere else and have the baby stopped in 24 hours because my work is slow. I do it by shooting a little air up into the womb, by going through the cervix into the uterus where the embryo is carried. She told me she wanted to do it. So Redman did it. On October 19th, Betty came back to Redman. Her husband and one of their two young children waited outside in the car. Redman took Betty upstairs, laid her on a table used for females, it said, and inserted a cannula into Betty's uterus. She pushed 5 syringes full of air into Betty's uterus. This is one of the craziest things I've ever heard of. And asked Betty if she could feel it. Betty said that she could a little. And she looked up at me and said, I feel choky, and then she passed out. And Redman noted that Betty was bleeding vaginally. Redman said, I used artificial respiration. I picked her up in my arms and laid her on the floor, and I slung water at her to try to revive her, and then I had a lady downstairs to call an ambulance. The ambulance came and took her to Harris Hospital, where Betty was pronounced dead on arrival, leaving 7-year-old David, and 2-year-old Kathy without a mother. Redman threw away the instruments, but the police quickly found them in the garbage and got a confession. An autopsy revealed that Betty had indeed been pregnant and blamed her death on the introduction of air into her uterus to try to produce an abortion. The 6 or 7 week embryo was intact and undamaged. Betty's blood vessels had air in them. One of her lungs had collapsed. And Redman seemed to have a mixed reputation in the area. She was charged with practicing medicine without a license in October of 1945, but by 1947 was back in good standing, with a newspaper reporting that she had returned after a study of endonasal and oral therapy at the Philadelphia College of Neuropathy and Naturopathy. Now, Redman's jury deliberated slightly under 2.5 hours before finding her guilty of murder by abortion. She was sentenced to 4 years in the penitentiary. Her appeal was denied, but she was paroled in May of 1957 prior to serving the full 4 years. So, and I don't know whether the licensed naturopath made Betty think that Mrs. Redman was a doctor. I'm really unclear on that. But I have to give her credit for calling an ambulance. That puts her way ahead of a lot of supposedly safe and legal abortion providers. If you follow this channel or my blog, you'll think that Mrs. Redman definitely, should be given credit for at least calling an ambulance, because that's more than I would expect at an abortion clinic.